In the 1960s, Boston was a city full of life, known for its history, culture, and proud, gritty neighborhoods. But for a couple of years, something else would make headlines, something that turned the city upside down. A killer who seemed to be everywhere but could never be found. A name that would haunt Boston forever, the Boston Strangler. Between 1962 and 1964, at least 13 women were murdered in their own homes. The victims ranged in age from a teenager to elderly women, all living alone. The method of murder was eerily consistent. Each woman was strangled with stockings, belts, or other items of clothing. In the quiet of their homes, these women fell victim to a predator who seemed to appear and disappear without a trace. Soon, the press would label the killer the Boston Strangler, a name that would be forever tied to the city's darkest chapter. Most of the murders took place in the quiet, residential neighborhoods of Boston. The killer was calculated, choosing women who lived alone, often elderly or vulnerable. These attacks occurred in broad daylight, and while they were never identical, they followed a distinct pattern. The victims were always found alone, often bound in ways that indicated a sense of dominance. It was as though this killer enjoyed toying with the city, and the authorities were no match for his cunning. As the body count rose, so did the panic. People locked their doors, covered their windows, and feared for their lives. Mothers warned their daughters, neighbors watched each other's backs, and the fear was noticeable. But even with mounting pressure, police had little to go on. Witnesses had seen nothing, and there were no fingerprints or physical evidence left behind. It seemed as though the Strangler was a ghost, a mysterious figure that couldn't be captured. The police launched a widespread investigation, but despite numerous interviews and tips from the public, the case remained unsolved. As months passed, the killer's presence only seemed to grow. Boston was in the grip of fear, but with no leads and no suspects. It appeared as though the Strangler would never be caught. Then, in 1964, the case took an unexpected turn. Albert DeSalvo, a man with a criminal background, was arrested for unrelated crimes. He was a petty thief and a convicted rapist, a man with a history of violence. But he was not initially connected to the murders. It wasn't until later, while he was being interrogated about other matters, that DeSalvo confessed to being the Boston Strangler. DeSalvo's confession was chilling in its detail. He spoke with disturbing accuracy about the murders, describing the victims, the ways they were strangled, and the locations of the crimes. To many, it seemed like the breakthrough they had been waiting for. But there was a problem. DeSalvo's confession was inconsistent, and not all the details he provided lined up with the actual crime scenes. DeSalvo's case quickly became a media sensation. The police, the press, and the public were eager to believe that they had finally caught the killer. But experts began to raise questions. Was DeSalvo really the Strangler? Or was he just a man trying to claim fame or avoid a harsher sentence for his other crimes? Some believed DeSalvo was confessing to crimes he had never committed, motivated by a desire for notoriety, or perhaps the hope of escaping a more severe punishment. Despite his confession, DeSalvo was never formally charged with the murders of the women. His trial for other crimes went ahead, but the case against him was full of holes. The authorities had no hard evidence linking him to the Boston Strangler killings. Even more troubling, some of the victims were found in situations that DeSalvo had not described in his confession. Some of the victims had been sexually assaulted, while others hadn't. Some were found fully clothed, while others were not. The manner in which they were killed was sometimes inconsistent. For many experts, these discrepancies were a sign that DeSalvo was not the killer he was, perhaps just a man with interest for claiming responsibility for something he hadn't done. Even with DeSalvo's confession, the case remained deeply unsatisfying. Without solid evidence, doubts continued to mount. In the years that followed, DNA evidence and modern forensic techniques would suggest that DeSalvo's confession was likely false. But by the time these methods were available, it was too late. Albert DeSalvo was killed in prison in 1973. His life ended in violence, just like the victims of the Boston Strangler. Today, the mystery of the Boston Strangler still lingers. In 2013, DNA evidence cast doubt on DeSalvo's confession. The investigation was reopened, and some believe that the true killer may never be found. The legacy of the Boston Strangler is a haunting one, a tale of fear, confusion, and a city forever marked by a series of brutal killings that may never be solved. Who was the Boston Strangler? Was Albert DeSalvo really the man behind the murders? Or was he just a man who wanted to be infamous? The questions may never be fully answered. For now, the mystery endures, and the story of the Boston Strangler is a reminder of a time when fear could transform a city and of a killer who may still be waiting to be revealed. Some mysteries are never meant to be solved. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden world of unsolved crimes and mysteries. Until next time, stay curious and stay safe.